Hello, BookTube. Randy Ray, the literate Texan, just made a video on one of Steve's favorite subjects, uh, how to read 100 books a year. Basically, the subject is not the number 100, it's you and your reading, which is one of my favorite subjects and has always been since long before there was a BookTube, since long before there was an internet. You and your reading. I spent a long time in retail bookselling, specifically so that I could talk to customers, and I would pump them for information about their reading. And I would hear all sorts of torrid confessions from them about whether or not their reading was what they want it to be. So when Randy made this video, I wanted to make a response video. So that's what this is. I will link to his video down below. It's wonderful. You really should watch it. He breaks down the subject perfectly in terms of the broader aspects that you have to think about, pointing out along the way two very important meta observations that I want to open with. One is that, according to every statistic that exists, if you read even one book a year, you are well ahead of the curve. A huge percentage of, for instance, Americans don't read anything at all after they leave high school and are no longer coerced into doing so. They don't read anything. They don't read for pleasure. I would argue a lot of those statistical surveys come up with figures around 50%. Say that 50% of adults in America don't read anything anymore. I would argue that people know when they're taking a poll, and they have just enough left over from their school days to know that reading is good and that they therefore should do it. And so they lie to pollsters. I mean, look at your own personal experience. Take a cross sample of any day of yours. How many of those people read? I would argue that the number of people who don't read anything after high school, never read for pleasure, is upwards of 80%, not 50%. But so any reading at all is well ahead of the curve. But the other meta point that Randy brings up in the course of his video is, do you want to be ahead of the curve? Should you care how many books a year you read? I know that for a lot of people, it's fun. A lot of people will set a Goodreads goal, for instance, where it's fun. A lot of people use that talismanic number, 100 books. A lot of people use that as a Goodreads goal, and they find it fun. They joke with themselves and with others if they fall short of that goal. They're also very happy if they exceed it. So if it's fun, sure. But the meta point that I wanted to stress before we start out here is that any time you introduce the word should into reading for pleasure, the subject has taken a wrong turn. There should be no should involved in reading for pleasure. Not the books that you should be reading, not the number of books you should be reading, etc., etc. It's for pleasure. And as Randy points out in his video, if you're finding it hard to summon the pleasure, then maybe reading a whole lot isn't for you. I don't think there are many people who fit that description who are watching either his channel or my channel, but it could be true. You never know. But he breaks the subject down into basically three big points. I'm simplifying his video. You should go and watch it for the full context, and also for the sotto voce reminders to stay hydrated. Randy is always on his pulpit about staying hydrated. But big thing number one is the math. Just simply the math involved. 100 books a year is 2 books a week. Can you do that? Can you do that? How fast do you read? What's the average length of the type of book you tend to read? Randy mentions in his video that he reads, for instance, mostly fiction, and that a rough idea of a fiction novel is around 300 pages. I wouldn't argue with that at all. That's a rough estimation of how long an average novel is 300 pages. So what is your reading speed, and how does that break down? If that's what you predominantly read, I think it's likely that most people on BookTube read fiction, predominantly fiction, and that they probably aren't holding out for mammoths like Shogun. They're probably reading normal length novels, which means those numbers are probably roughly in the ballpark of being accurate. So that boils down to what Randy points out is 15 hours a week in order to get that number to 100 by the end of a year. And 15 hours a week, as he mentions, is a part-time job. So if you're looking at your life and you're thinking, well, right now, there's no way that I could take a part-time job of 15 hours a week, so I obviously can't hit that goal. we'll come to that next. That's the next point. But that is the calculation that you have to do if you are all fired concerned with an actual numerical goal of 100 books. Neither Randy nor I thinks you should be. I will hesitantly speak for him and say, I certainly say you shouldn't care about the numerics, about the metric first, as opposed to anything else. You shouldn't be staying up late, getting up early, neglecting other parts of your life in order to hit some artificially chosen number of books per year. There's no should. There shouldn't be a should involved in any of this. But if once you've done the calculations for large subject number 1, which is the math involved, well, then we come to large subject number 2, which is the time. Can you find that time in your life? And this is the subject, this is the larger point on the subject of reading 100 books a year that has always caused me the most tongue biting as I try to control myself. Because I have heard from I don't know how many people over the decades telling me I just don't have that kind of time. I just don't. How I wish I had time to do reading, all the reading that I want to do. How I wish I did, they say forlornly. Oh my, I wish I had that time, but I just don't. And in the course of my life, invariably, sometimes I have said to those people, if I knew them well enough, was comfortable enough with them, I would say, do you really want me to look at your life? You've done me the honor of being pretty confidential with me about what the shape of your life is like. Do you want me to come over there and point out the wasted time, point out the time that even you would agree is wasted, the time that you could be spending on reading? Many is the time where I've wanted to say that, and every single time that I have actually done it, invariably, 100% of the time, there's acres and acres of time that could be devoted to reading. Just acres and acres of it. I have never known it to be true that I just can't find the time. I have never known that to be true. As Randy points out, you have the same amount of hours in your day as he does, the same amount of hours in your day as I do. Your day might be different. Your obligations might be greater, but I think you'd be hard-pressed to find that you'd be hard-pressed to have a life that has no time for reading, or so little time for reading that you're always pining for more. I think that would be hard to come by. And fortunately, we have a test sample in BookTube itself. Our little corner of BookTube has a number of examples of people who are extremely busy and still manage to get in a large amount of reading. Two of the most famous of whom would be Ollie at Criminale, who has not only a family but a job, and Michael K. Vaughan, who has a job that requires him, as you see in his videos, to get up before the crack of dawn. And he also has Roger Hotep to take care of. Who knows what kind of care Roger Hotep requires. And yet, Ollie and Mike still find time to do a lot of reading. I find it hard to believe that there are as many cases out there as claim to be of people who have 10 times the obligations they do. No, in my experience, it's almost, in my experience, my own experience, it has been literally always, 100% of the time, that people are just wasting time. And when I have confronted some people on the time that they waste, the oceans of time that they waste, some of them have come back to me with, well, I need a little bit of downtime. I need a little bit of, of off time. I can't just switch right away from doing something to reading. Okay. All right. I don't believe that's true. I think the switch from doing A to doing B is just a muscle. And it gets stronger the more you use it. But B, if that's true, if the huge amount of time that you spend doom scrolling, for instance, or your mouth hanging open while you play a video game, is your downtime, is you switching from one high pressure thing to another, well, if that's true, and of course, keep in mind, I've never known that to literally be true, but I have often heard that. If that's true, well, then reading is just another chore for you, and you should rethink the way you think about it. Maybe you should stop whining about how little time you get to do it. Maybe you don't enjoy it enough to justify those whines. Maybe, at the very least, you should stop making those whining complaints in front of me. Maybe it's just another chore, and if it is, well, maybe you should rethink what you think about reading. And then you won't be bothered. You won't be pining for those hours. You'll use them in the way that you actually want. But if that's not true, you can certainly find the time. Certainly. 100 books a year is not impossible for anyone. Well, I would find it very hard to read 100 books a year. That would be very, very hard for me to do. But not for that, not for the same reasons. But for normal people, normal busy people with lots of commitments, lots of irons in the fire, 100 books a year is not impossible. You can do it. No matter what your job, no matter what your family obligation, you are still wasting enough time to get those books read. Now, the opening question about whether or not you want to, that's something else again. That is between you and your priest. That you need to figure that out on your own. But if you want to read more, I guarantee you have the time to do that reading. So then it's just a question of motivation, which was the third big point that Randy made, which is one of the things that will help you to find that time, one of the things that will help you to strengthen that muscle of moving from doing one thing to doing another. That movement requires experience. It requires work to do. It's a muscle. And that muscle is, for most people, that muscle is in terrible shape, which accounts for the disastrous rise of so-called multitasking, where you give yourself the illusion. It's just an illusion. It's not real. Where you give yourself the illusion that you're not actually switching between those two things. You're doing them both at the same time. No, you're doing one 30% more poorly than you would otherwise do it, but you aren't doing both at the same time. No, the muscle, the muscle of actually switching from A to B takes time to work up. And that requires motivation. You have to work at it to build it up. And if that's true, well, what is the state of your motivation when it comes to reading? One thing, the big thing, the obvious, huge thing that will help you to read 100 books a year is to be motivated to do it. And every reader, I think, has a shade different motivation than every other reader. But Randy puts forward, for instance, the obvious. It's an obvious observation, but it as so much else is true in the 21st century, it often doesn't get observed. We have lost track of the basics, a lot of the basics. And one of those is the one way to build up motivation for reading is to read what you want. Because then the motivation is there already. That again taps into what you should be outlawing here, which is any idea of should. So often, should in reading cuts directly against the motivation of reading what you want. Because maybe what you want to read is just cheesy thrillers. All the time, or almost all the time. I just want to keep popping down easy thrillers. Well, you know perfectly well, you know as well as I do, not in this little corner of BookTube. Thankfully, we have a gated community here where that kind of crap does not apply. But in the larger reading world, what there is of it, you know perfectly well that just reading cheesy thrillers or just reading YA fiction or just reading romance will meet with looks. I'm sure you know the look. I know the look. I hate condescending people like that. I hate them, especially when it comes to reading. You are leaving yourself open for that look, and maybe you've internalized those snobs, so maybe you give yourself that look. That look should go. That look is based on should. And in my own mind, in my own conversation, if you, for instance, read only YA fiction, I might say, well, maybe you ought to vary that up. Maybe you should vary that up because you're missing a lot. But I won't say it should in the sense of puritanical work ethic. I won't be doing anything like that. If you enjoy it, you should read it. That's the only should that is involved in reading. You should read what you like. And that'll help with your motivation. And I would argue that once you realize how much fun it is to actually get in all the reading that you want to do, it'll be its own motivation. Another point I might add here that didn't quite come up in Randy's video is that reading on a device, like for instance, maybe you put a Kindle app on your phone. Well, your phone is always with you. And that makes it really easy. Oh my. Reading on a little phone is maybe a little bit of a strain on your eye. Reading a backlit screen is maybe a little bit of a strain on your eye, but maybe not. And there are all sorts of ways for you to change the lighting and the color temperature on a cell phone to lessen that strain. And your phone is always with you. That's when you start to realize that you can read a book on your phone. Oh my God, you start to realize the huge amounts of time, little gaps of time all through your day that could go to reading, that instead go to you staring out a window. You can add a lot of time to your reading that way. And there are a lot of other tricks like that. Reading before bed, reading early in the morning, reading at meals, all sorts of tricks like that to help with increasing the amount that you read in any given day, which will, I think, increase your motivation to read. Randy gives some One piece of bad advice, I think two pieces of bad advice. One piece of bad advice he gives is to caution against actual speed reading. And I totally second that. Actual speed reading involves a process called gapping, where you are trained to look at a sentence and gap out the parts you need from that sentence, and then you're trained to do that to a paragraph, and then to a whole page. The Evelyn Wood speed reading program and things like it are built on the process that I just described, which, as you know from that description, means you aren't reading everything. And you're certainly not slowing down for tone or for any kind of nuance that the author is trying. You're certainly not doing any of that. No, speed reading, actual speed reading, is just as much of a blasphemy to actual reading as Blinkist or short form is. It's to be avoided at all costs. It is for people who are absolutely obsessed with page counts, and you shouldn't be. This is not a contest. This is not a race at all. Not only because some people have more time to read than others, but because some people are just faster readers than others. There's no superiority involved in that. There's no bragging rights there. It's just some people are. You know that perfectly well from watching BookTube. What are these examples you could come up with? Jason at Old Blues Chapter and Verse is, by his own confession, a slow reader. Where are you going to find a better reader than him? Nothing gets past him at all. So it's just that he doesn't read fast. That's all. Whereas Ollie at Criminale is a self-confessed fast reader. Again, what gets past him? Nothing. No, it's neither one. They're not a better reader and a worse reader. It just happens to be the way your brain is wired. That some people are just naturally faster readers than others. There are all sorts of things you can do to up that speed. We've mentioned some of them. You can devote time to reading. You can find time for reading. You could also minimize or eliminate your sub-vocalizing so that you're not saying the words mentally while you're reading them. You don't need to do that. Your brain doesn't need to do that. But you've been trained since the cradle to do that, and it does slow you down. It yokes you to your out loud reading speed, which is about a third of your reading speed without reading it out loud. You could do all of that stuff, but you don't need to. Some people, even without those things, are just faster readers. So one of Randy's cautionary tales, one of his pieces of bad advice, is avoid actual speed reading. Don't be that obsessed. As he points out in his video, the point is for you to enjoy what you're reading, not for you to just rack up page numbers. So I would avoid that. And another thing that he mentions, he doesn't say specifically as bad advice, is to read a bunch of short books in order to up your stats, in order to give you the feeling of maybe being a faster reader than you actually are. Randy doesn't want to stress that as bad advice because you might want to read short books, and you should be reading what you want to read. However, if you're using it in order to bolster stats, for instance, using it in order to reach a Goodreads goal of 100 books, then you're misusing it. Then you're misusing it. Then it's just a trick. Then you are obsessed with the number. And the key here, the key takeaway that I want to give here for my response video here is that you shouldn't be obsessed with numbers. If you're reading for your own pleasure, if you're not reading on deadline or for school, you shouldn't be obsessed with any kind of numbers. None of this is performative. If you're watching these videos, you have found the right group of readers. You've found this little corner of BookTube where no one is putting on airs. No one is doing anything like bragging about page numbers, where it's just different folks doing different things at different speeds, and we all just learn to appreciate it. I have loved finding that community. I've been looking my whole life for such a community that's non-judgmental, full of gentle ribbing, full of good joking, and also leaning on each other for recommendations and whatnot. I've been waiting my whole life for a group like that. If you're watching these videos, Randy's and mine, you've probably found this group. So you don't have to worry about that stuff anymore. You don't have to worry about it. You can make a Goodreads goal of 100 books, but we will laugh with you, not at you, if you fall short of it. We'll laugh right along with you as you poke fun at yourself for this, that, or the other reason why you didn't. And we'll also cheer with you if you exceed it. So this Randy's it's an evergreen subject. You know, how to read 100 books a year. It's some reason that number has some sort of magic significance with readers, I guess, because it's nice and big and round. And because it is right on the borderline of achievability for most people, no matter how busy they are. I would argue that it is right on the borderline of achievability. I would argue that if you move around your time commitments just a bit and prioritize just a little more, you can easily do 100 books a year. Easily. So I just wanted to make a response video along these lines to encourage you to think about these things. It's worth thinking about the math. It's worth thinking about how much time you devote to reading during the day and during the week. Is it commensurate with how important you say reading is to you? And it's also worth looking at your motivation. If your motivation is mostly the bad kind of should, the school kind of should, no wonder you're dragging your feet at what you read. That will only hurt your end goals, not help them. Anyway, it's a fascinating subject. I'd love to hear what you think about it, and I'll leave a link to Randy's video down below. So feel free to sound off with him as well. But anyway, I'm going to wrap this up, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.